Good evening. We're going to start off this evening with a work session on economic opportunities analysis. With that, I will go ahead and call this work session to order. If we could have a roll call, please.
I can't hear you.
This is June 22nd, 2015. Counselor Bennett is absent. Counselor Tom Anderson is present. Counselor Brad Nanke is present and will be presiding president tonight. Counselor McCoy, present. Diana Dickey, present. Daniel Benjamin, present. Warren Bednards, present. Jim Lewis, present. Casey Duncan, present. And Dan Atchison, present.
Thank you. I like it when I don't have to say here. Sweet. Maybe we may change some rules. I can do that as Mayor Pro Tem. With that, Glenn Gross.
Thank you so much.
Community Development.
Thank you. Good evening. I am Glenn Gross, the Director of Community Development, and with me tonight is Lisa Anderson-Ogilvie, Planning Administrator. Lisa's going to do most of the heavy lifting tonight. She's got a great presentation that she's going to give you in just a moment. I just wanted to kind of set the stage a bit. This is a follow-up to a March 23rd City Council meeting at which we presented the economic opportunities analysis and housing need analysis together. And at that meeting, we had a lot of questions. You had a lot of questions. We were able to answer some of them, but due to time limitations and so forth, we decided it would be best to carry it over to a work session, and that's what we're doing here tonight. Tonight, we're just going to talk about the EOA, or the Economic Opportunity Analysis. There'll be a follow-up work session in September, probably, where we'll talk about the housing need analysis. It's important, we think, staff thinks, it's important to move the EOA ahead and adopt it as part of the comprehensive plan for several reasons that Lisa will detail in just a moment. But we're hoping that after tonight, you'll be comfortable to direct us to put that process in play to actually adopt the EOA. It's important to understand that we firmly believe that the adoption of the EOA will not facilitate an urban growth boundary expansion. It was never intended, we never set out to do the EOA because we wanted to propose an urban growth boundary expansion. We had other reasons that we'll talk about, but primarily we needed to update our comprehensive plan, and particularly our economic part of the comprehensive plan. So that's why we did the EOA. There were some questions about what's Kaiser doing? Are they going to propose an urban growth boundary expansion? How does this relate to that? If Kaiser does move forward and propose an urban growth boundary expansion, that will be a separate, very complicated process that they will have to go through. And there are specific requirements that require the City of Salem's participation, and we'll have an opportunity to try to influence that decision. And if necessary, there will be an opportunity to appeal the decision if council deems that appropriate. So that is definitely a separate process from what we're talking about, and we can certainly elaborate on that if you need us to. But at this point, I think I'll turn it over to Lisa, who will make our presentation. Thanks.
Thank you, Glenn. Yes, good evening. My name is Lisa Anderson-Ogilvie. I'm the Planning Administrator. And like Glenn said tonight, we're just going to talk about the EOA, or the economic portion of this study. So even though we did the two studies at the same time with the same committee that some of you were on, so you'll hopefully fondly remember those committee meetings, we're just going to talk about the EOA tonight. So I wanted to start to remind the council what at the core is an economic opportunities analysis and what it's not. So it's really just a land need study. So we're just trying to figure out how much land we need. And we have a planning period, and that's 20 years. So 20 years from this year. So when we start talking about numbers, we're not talking about numbers on the ground today. We're talking about numbers as we grow throughout the next 20 years. So that's something important to keep in mind. So we're not talking about if you go outside, you're going to see this huge deficit or surplus or whatever. We're talking about throughout the 20-year period. And we're not talking about buildings, so some of you might have been at the SEDCOR lunch where they talked about a lack of industrial buildings when they're trying to cite businesses here. We're not talking about that. We're just talking about land that's zoned appropriately for employment. And so we had 3 reasons that we wanted to do this study. So like Glenn said, it was not because we thought we wanted to expand the urban growth boundary. But the first one, of course, is we want to make sure we have sufficient land. So that's the whole point of the study. Do we have enough land for the next 20 years for employment? So that's commercial and industrial land. And one of the main things we wanted to make sure is that our economic development strategies are aligning with our land use. So we have urban development staff and SEDCOR and others out there trying to get businesses to come to Salem, to retain the ones we have, help them expand. And we want to make sure we have the land to make that possible. So that was one of the main goals of this study. And then we also wanted to make sure that we could respond appropriately when people come forward with zone change requests and they want to change their industrial land to commercial. Some of you that have been around for a while know that we've had quite a few of these in the last 5 to 10 years. And as staff, we always struggle with, well, should we recommend approval? And the Planning Commission would say to us, well, how do we know it's appropriate to approve this? And the council would say that. And we didn't really have any basis for saying that we thought it was a really good idea. So we wanted to make sure we had some basis and numbers and facts to respond to those. So one of the first questions that was asked last time is, what area are we talking about when we're talking about this study? So here's a map of the urban growth boundary. So everything in red is the urban growth boundary. As you know, we share it with Kaiser. So we're talking about everything inside the red except for this dark gray spot for Kaiser. So they did their own study. We're not talking about that part of the UGB, and I'll talk about the UGB a little bit later. But so everything inside the red except for that gray area is what we're talking about. So it doesn't matter if the land was inside city limits or outside city limits for this study. It's just talking about in the UGB. So what are the main findings and results? As you probably recall from March, there was 2 main findings of the study. The first is that we have a surplus of industrial land, 907 acres, and a deficit of commercial land. So the first thing I want to say is that the study is pretty well laid out by state law about how you do this study, and there's no other term we can use besides surplus or deficit. So we may want to, but it's you either have too much or you don't have enough, and that's kind of how the study is laid out. So to determine our surplus, I don't think we explained it that well last time what we did. So we have projected our population, again, for those 20 years, and based on that, we can project how much employment land we need. And then we've looked at the land that we have that's zoned for industrial commercial, that we already have inside the UGB. And we see, do those 2 things match up? Well, we actually have more land than we project we need. So just because we're saying a surplus doesn't mean it needs to go away, and I'll talk about that a little bit more. But we've actually projected how much we need, and we have that, and in addition, we have some more. And then for commercial land deficit, again, it's over 20 years, so it's not like you're going to go out today and see that we're, oh my goodness, we don't have 270 acres of commercial land. It's saying that if our population grows the way we think it will, and no zone changes happen, nothing happens, the land stays exactly the same, that in 20 years we'll be short 270 acres from what our population really needs. So it's, again, it's the 20-year look. For the commercial land, it's 60% office land and 40% retail. So the main question is, okay, well, what does that mean? You say we have a surplus, what are you really talking about? The first thing it means is we don't need a UGB expansion. So even though we don't have enough commercial, we have plenty of industrial and other designations, so we don't need to expand, which we didn't think we did, but now we know. The main thing that we should take away from this is that we're in a really great position for our economic development, right? We're trying to get businesses to come here. We're trying to make sure the ones we have can expand, and we have the land for them to do that. So we have a great position for that. The past councils, past staff, working with the state and other things, you know, we've brought Mill Creek Corporate Center online and other Salem Renewable Energy Technology Park, other industrial land. We've done a really good job. So this is what this study shows us. And it means we have really great flexibility for recruitment because we have so much land. And the amount of land we have, if you don't know, is extremely unique in the Willamette Valley. So there's no other community that does a study like this and has the same numbers or anywhere close to a surplus that we do. So we have a really great position. Even in the, you know, comparing us to Portland Metro, anywhere in the valley, we're doing really good for the amount of land we have. So we should be really happy to know that we not only do we have the land we project we need, but we have more land than that. So if our projections were wrong, or we're really great at economic development and getting companies here, then we have the land for them. So we should be really happy about that. And we don't have a big need for infrastructure investments. A lot of communities, when they do this study, they find out they don't have the land, and so they start looking at having to expand their UGB onto farmland. and then having to pay for the services for that land. And so not all of our industrial commercial land is served, of course, but most of it is or has an ability to be served. And again, we're not proposing any zone changes. So just because we have this surplus, we're not saying we should do anything to get rid of it or to change any of it. We just know now that we have more than we think we need, so that's really good. So for the commercial land, okay, we have a deficit. So what does that mean? Well, the first thing to know is we're not required to address this deficit. So, and we're not proposing to. We're not bringing you any zone changes to change anything to commercial. Basically, we think the market will respond to this deficit because it will. It has. We've seen that, right? We've seen that over time as people are coming forward with zone changes to commercial. But because we know there's going to be a deficit, we're going to see increased pressure to convert our industrial land, right? People are going to want to convert it to commercial, and we've seen that happen, especially when there's existing buildings and they have trouble finding a tenant. The next thing you know, they want to change it to commercial. So when we presented this to the committee, we thought about, okay, we know we want to preserve our industrial land, but how do we want to do that? And there's different ways that we could do that. And the first is we could be really, really strict, and we could pick parcels. We could look at a map and pick parcels and say, those are the parcels we know we don't want to change. And we could put that in our comp plan and lock it down, end our flexibility. Or we could be more flexible than that and think about it in a different way. And that's the way the committee went. So they didn't want to be super locked down and restrictive on land. They wanted to be a little more flexible, but still looking for guidance. So we did two things to help with the guidance. First, we said, okay, well, we have high value industrial land and we want to preserve it. Well, how do we know what land is high value? And so we came up with some things that would describe it. Again, the committee did not want to pick parcels on a map, but they wanted to come up with some descriptors of what high value industrial land is. So of course, first is designated for industrial use. That makes sense. It's probably flat, 10 acres in size or larger, so you're not expecting a company to have to, combine a bunch of parcels together. It's already ready for them. It's probably in an industrial district, so you're not having incompatible uses nearby. Probably has direct access to a state highway or I-5, is serviced, right, has infrastructure, or there's a plan to service it, and it has rail access. And so even though we didn't pick parcels on a map, we did identify some general areas in the study. So Mill Creek Corporate Center, right, is the #1 area with high value industrial land that we know we want to preserve. The Renewable and Energy and Technology Park, areas in our urban renewal areas, because we've invested a lot of taxpayer money into those areas. So conversely, we decided, okay, so if that's the land we want to preserve that has those characteristics, how do we know if land's okay to commit to commercial? So if somebody comes forward with their zone change request, the planning commissioners on our committee said, how are we going to respond to that if we're not picking parcels on a map? And I know there's a surplus, and what are we going to do? And so instead, we came up with some factors to consider for land that might be okay to change, because we know people are going to come forward at some point and ask to change some of the land to commercial. So here's some of the factors, and it's pretty much the opposite of the list I just showed you, right? So it's outside of an industrial area, or it's isolated from other industrial uses. It might be next to an incompatible use like housing. It might be near parcels that have already changed to commercial, so they're kind of committing the area to commercial uses. Might have limited access to roads, so it may not be near I-5 or highways. Yes?
Thank you. I have a question.
Okay.
In the microphone.
When you say it's surrounded by incompatible uses such as housing, Lisa, I presume then you're not necessarily saying this is potential conversion of industrial to commercial, or are you?
Yes, I'm saying this would be that it might be compatible to go to commercial. It'd be less compatible to stay as industrial.
So if there was an industrial area that is surrounding by houses, you would say it's not compatible for industrial areas. That's just the way it happened, though.
Right, yes.
Okay, got it.
And there are some parcels out there that over time.
No, I
just-
understand
yeah,
that.
yeah.
I understand how it works. I'm just, so the potential conversion from industrial to commercial
Yes.
is really what you're talking about?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And that's mostly what we've seen. We've seen industrial land go into IC
I would assume
or
that's
some
what
other
happens,
commercial.
but
Right,
let me
yes.
make sure.
So it's probably not a flat parcel, and it's probably not near rail access. It doesn't mean a parcel needs to check every single one of these to convert, but it's something for us as staff to consider when we make a recommendation, and for the council or the planning commission to consider. So again, the committee really wanted to keep flexibility. They wanted some guidance on these zone changes that they've been having to address, but they wanted to retain the flexibility to look at each proposal in totality, to not overcommit themselves ahead of time. So the recommendations of the study, and these are our general recommendations. As Glenn said, we want you to adopt the study. We want it to be adopted into the comprehensive plan. And the main recommendation, if we passed out the implementation strategy, that's all language to update in the comprehensive plan. So that's the only real tangible thing that would happen when this is adopted. We're not asking for zone changes on properties or code amendments. Instead, we want to update our comprehensive plan policies. And the committee went through every single policy in there that addressed employment and discussed what it should be. Some of them are fine, but a lot of them were written in the early 80s and addressed employment needs or industry needs that don't exist anymore and haven't for decades. And they won't help us preserve our industrial land or make sure that we are reflective of our current economic development strategy. And the study also recommended that we track our zone changes so that these numbers don't get out of date. We're not waiting 15 years to redo the study to see, oh, how did we do the last 15 years? That every year we kind of redo our numbers so we know how we're going with zone changes in our land. So I'm going to switch gears a little bit. So the big question that was asked in March was about Kaiser and their potential UGB expansion, which Glenn touched on. So here is a map, again, that we looked at before. The first question that I remember being asked is, well, does Kaiser have its own portion of the UGB? What do we mean Kaiser's portion and Salem's portion? So as I said before, we share UGB with Kaiser. It's what's surrounded in red, everything in red there. But generally for these two studies, we've broken it up to look at quote unquote our portion and Kaiser's portion. As Glenn mentioned, if Kaiser wants to expand the UGB, they would have a opportunity. They would have a requirement to ask us to concur. So they would have to ask us. They would have to ask Marion County or Polk County. All four of the jurisdictions a long time ago agreed to that process. So if any jurisdiction wants to move the UGB, you have to ask the other one. If they don't concur, there's a process to appeal that. The main question about if Kaiser has its own portion is really untested. We don't know. So generally, you would think not. No, we share UGB, and that's kind of the end of the story. However, Kaiser's been working with the state to look at their portion, and they've done a study looking at their portion, and they might want to expand their portion. But it's unknown until they move forward with that, if that's actually something allowed under state law. Yes?
Thank you, Lisa. You said there's an appeal process. Is that to LCDC or LUBA, or what's the appeal process?
It depends on how many acres they propose, but
okay.
Generally it would be to LUBA, okay. I believe.
Then there was some discussion about Kaiser wanting to expand the urban growth boundary to include the Roaring Rapids Park or whatever that is. Is that the only way they're thinking of expanding it, or they might be thinking of more?
Yes, Kaiser actually, and those of you that were on council last year will remember that Kaiser did expand part of the UGB for the Kaiser Rapids
purpose?
Park.
Okay.
Yes, and that had to come to council here. We had a public hearing and decided to concur on that expansion, and all jointly took that action together. Yes.
Thank you.
So I don't see that Nate Brown from Kaiser's in the audience. I thought he was going to be here in case you had questions. But our understanding from talking to Kaiser is that they don't have an application that's imminent. So they're not preparing an application to bring forward anytime soon. And in fact, what they're trying to do is get a grant from the state to look at ways that they can meet some of their need inside their current boundary. So they're wanting to maybe increase density before they apply. Yes?
Thank you. Well, it looks like from that map that the Kaiser city limits are exactly the same as the UGB as opposed to Salem, where we've got a lot of room.
The gray is not the Kaiser city limits. It's just showing the Kaiser section. Okay. But they are pretty close to having
built out.
Yes, they are pretty built out. But they could increase density potentially.
Councilor Benjamin.
Those two large areas on the right side that the green goes through, those are actually county, even though it's UBG?
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Yes. Okay, so this table here shows, so Kaiser did these exact same studies. They did the employment half and the housing half and 2 years ago. And so they're showing their need here. This is what they projected they need. Total, overall, if Kaiser was to move forward today with an application, they could ask for, based on their study, 385 acres. So from our perspective, that's actually a pretty small number. And you can see only 20 of that would be commercial. They projected 0 acreage that they need for industrial because they are acknowledging that they cannot compete with Salem for industrial land, specifically cannot compete with Mill Creek. Their 41 acres is they're aspiring towards like a medical campus, hospital campus. The majority of their land that they are projecting they need is residential, and the parks and schools that would go with it. So again, from our perspective, it's a pretty small number and may not be big enough that would rise to the level of us objecting. But we don't have an application to look at this point. Now, if Salem decided they did want to object when an application comes forward, actually having the EOA adopted would give us a stronger position, and having our housing needs adopted would give us a stronger position, because those two studies show that all that need can be met in our side of the UGB in the existing total UGB. So if we're thinking we want to object, or we might want to retain our ability to object, the easiest way to ensure that that's successful is adopting the EOA and the HNA. Just again, because it's pure numbers, we're talking about tons of land on our side, and it would meet this need. So hopefully that answers the questions about that. And okay.
Councilor Dickey.
I only had one more thing. I just wanted to make a comment, and I can't remember if we had a work session on this or something, and I know we don't have time today, but the relationship between Salem and Kaiser and the urban growth boundary is very unique within the state. I mean, most urban growth boundaries are different. They're just like a single entity. So that might be something, some information, for counselors if they have kind of questions about that, because it hasn't been tested as far as I understand. I think Eugene and Springfield tried to do something a year or so ago, but for the most part, we're a really kind of unique urban growth boundary versus other areas that might be a single city that want to expand, and then it's just within their own jurisdiction. So that might be interesting information for counselors, because I can't remember if it was a work session, or I remember having a workshop or going to something and actually kind of getting a bigger picture understanding of that process.
Yeah, because there's only a couple of us, and I think Eugene Springfield actually separated.
Yeah, Eugene
they
and
found that
Springfield
that wasn't
separated.
Necessarily in all of their best interests to some extent as well.
Exactly, yes. So outside of the metro region, we're the only joint UGB, so we are very unique, yes. And then, so again, I just want to reiterate what the results of adopting the EOA is. So we would be able to respond more adequately to zone change requests, and I'm specifically talking about a change from industrial to something else. We could update the comprehensive plan policies relating to employment. We think this would help strengthen our ability to preserve our high-value land, industrial land. Again, it would help us respond to Kaiser's potential UGB expansion if that comes forward. And just to be clear, it won't result in any zone changes, so there's no zone changes and there's no code amendments proposed with the adoption of this. And that's all I had in the presentation. We'll be happy to answer more questions.
Excellent. Questions of counselors? I have one straight off then. In the high preservation type areas, I know in the Mill Creek Corporate Center we have some degree of commercial capability to help service those industrial areas with things to keep people from having to drive halfway across town. We always heard Councilor Tessler complain about no place to eat down in the Fairview Industrial Park. How are we situated in most of the larger industrial areas with small commercial component capacity or potential beyond Mill Creek? Because we know about Mill Creek, but
yeah, so this study is just based on the comprehensive plan designation of a parcel. So if something is designated, like Mill Creek is employment center, it just counted towards our industrial land, although it might allow some small scale retail. So we didn't get into that so much. What we've been seeing though is a lot of conversions from industrial general or industrial park to industrial commercial, with the caveat that, well, it's still an industrial zone, but in reality 70% of the development in IC is commercial development. It's not necessarily industrial, it's not staying industrial. So we took that into account with our numbers to reflect that. I'm not sure if that really answers your
I would
question.
just hate for us to limit ourselves so much that we couldn't provide some of those services
Right.
in the industrial areas.
Actually, most of the industrial zones do provide a limited amount of service commercial type uses. Okay. Industrial general zone does, industrial commercial certainly does. The Fairview Industrial Drive area, having been originally exclusively IBC, or Industrial Business Campus zoning, was the exception to that. And that zone, that IBC zone, was very restrictive in what it would allow. And I think to the extent that there's been some zone changes to IC in that area, has probably reduced that amount of, or that increased some flexibility there that wasn't there. But that's a unique situation, I think, and I don't think we have that problem in industrial areas of the city generally.
Okay, excellent. Councilor McCoy? Any other hands?
A couple things. How much in acres of commercial land do we have now in the city developed or in use?
It's in the study here. We'll have to look it up.
And how many available that aren't developed?
Yeah.
If we're going to end up with minus 271, where are we
Well,
today?
I'm just curious what's there.
Do you have another question while we're looking at it?
Look, it's in here.
Yeah, what would an example of where you're developing commercial and industrial currently be, just so I get a picture more in my head, where we had industrial land and then there's commercial development has gone on in an industrial.
Well, the
zone.
Fairview Industrial Drive area is certainly an example of that, where it was all, as I said, IBC zoning. That was a very successful industrial park for a number of years. Then we had some major changes in the profile of the industrial picture here in Salem with the departure of Sumco, and then we found ourselves in a situation with some vacant buildings that just kind of sat there for quite a while, and so there was some pressure to change the zoning to allow for different uses to go into those, and so then we had some changes to IC, industrial commercial, which does allow some office and commercial. And so that's a good example of an area that kind of transitioned from pure industrial to a mix now of offices, businesses, and still some manufacturing as well, of course.
Thanks.
And we have the number. So almost 2,000 acres of developed land right now that's either designated central business district or commercial. So.
Councilor Berners?
So I always get a little nervous when we talk about a deficit, or I'm sorry, a surplus, as if we're going to get rid of it because it's surplus to us. Yeah. But the industrial land, we're not proposing it. I just wanted to bring to light that, so we're talking about 900 acres of surplus industrial land. Of that, Mill Creek Corporate is roughly 500?
Yeah, roughly 480 acres, I think, or something. But it's important that to again, for us anyway, to say that we didn't come up with that word surplus. That's just what the rule says it's supposed to be called. We don't think of it as we have too much. We think of it as we have enough and then some. And it puts us in a position of being able to respond to market forces in a more flexible way than we would otherwise. So it's a good thing, and we are not proposing to do any city-initiated zoning either way. Now, when it comes to the housing need analysis, that's another situation. We will be required to do some rezoning to multifamily to make up for the deficit. But for this, we're not proposing that. We don't have to, and we're not proposing that.
So is there any discussion in reference to eliminating the IBC zone?
There was a lot of discussion of that during the UDC process.
I was there. I'm just baiting.
Up and then into the UDC process. It was decided that rather than just eliminate it, it would be reformatted. And so we did a substantial amount of changes to the structure of that zone in the UDC. It's not the same zone as it was before. It allows for more flexibility. It allows for offices, for example, and some limited commercial as well. So,
Councilor Lewis?
Not a question, really, just a comment. I want to compliment the staff and the process they went through and listening to the folks, because there was a concern at first that this industrial land was so sacred, and we're hearing the staff talk about the value of it, that maybe we should tag it and put it away on the shelf and don't let anybody touch it. But as we see now, we're not gonna do that. We're gonna watch it real close and don't let anybody touch it. But we're not gonna put alarms around it or anything. We're gonna leave it flexible, and flexibility, I think, is the key to this report and the way we're going. I think it's very good, and I recommend that we do approve it.
Councilor Benjamin, followed by Councilor Anderson.
I like what I'm hearing in regards to flexibility, because it kind of makes sense. We have this great pristine land that you can't even find in Portland. So if somebody's come down to look at it and they're saying, well, you know, this is great, but the nearest restaurants or dry cleaners or whatnot are halfway across town, I like the idea that you're being open about. Well, what if those dry cleaners came tomorrow? We want to be flexible and fleet of foot to say, yeah, go ahead, put it in. Right around the peripheral edges, if you will, or wherever it looks like it makes more sense. And I like hearing that, because then if people are willing to invest in those smaller businesses, then maybe the larger ones will come, or vice versa. So I like to be fleet of foot on that. Thank you for doing that.
With a triple liner underneath the dry cleaner, by the way. Councilor Anderson.
Thank you. I want to follow up a little bit on what Councilor Dickey said in terms of the idea that we will have more ability to oppose an expansion that Kaiser requests for the UGB if we adopt this. I lived in Eugene for 33 years, and I know that Eugene and Springfield are separated. They're separated by I-5, partly they're separated by the river, they're separated by parks and unincorporated areas. A totally different situation than Kaiser and Salem, which are contiguous. You know, if you didn't see a sign, you wouldn't know when you were going from Kaiser to Salem. So to me, that means this is a unique situation, and it all should be looked at as one. And Kaiser may want to say we want to expand because we in our city limits are missing this acreage, but we say this is a package deal, and we've got plenty in our city. So that fact alone is enough to, in addition to the excellent report, is enough for me to say, you know, I think we ought to adopt this.
Councilor Bernard's.
Well, quick question. Both of the Housing Needs Economic Opportunities report and the Draft Employment Implementation Plan are both draft. Why are they draft? Why aren't these final that are coming to us? Is it because we haven't adopted it?
Right.
Yes.
We could call it proposed, but once you adopt it, it will just be the economic opportunities
Okay,
analysis.
so there's no updating to these documents
No.
as a draft is
No.
what I would think. Okay.
No.
So following that line of discussion, as far as the process then to move this forward for future council adoption.
We would bring back, with your direction, we would bring back a report that would recommend a process to adopt the EOA into the comprehensive plan in a certain manner, and to adopt some specific text amendments to the comprehensive plan as well.
Councilor Bennett.
As you come to us, Glenn, would that come in pieces? I mean, that would not be
No.
a single action? It would be a single
Yeah,
action.
just for the economic opportunity analysis
okay.
part of it. Before you came, Counselor, I was saying that tonight we are just following up from that March 23rd council meeting. We're just following up with the EOA tonight, and we're asking for direction to proceed with that. We intend to come to you in September with another work session on the housing need analysis.
Okay.
And that will be a whole separate process that we'll talk about.
Okay. Okay.
Does that make sense? or-
It does. I guess when I listened to you talking about zoning and code amendments and all that, I assumed it would come in pieces.
There's no.
Nothing associated with this.
There's
that
no zone changes.
Anything.
No, there's no code amendments associated with this. There's no zone changes. All we're talking about is adopting the document itself as a supporting document of the comprehensive plan. And then, as Lisa was talking about, there are some specific text updates that we want to propose to the comprehensive plan text itself. That's what we're talking about.
The only, I apologize for being late and for not having read this as carefully as I should at this point. I've read it before, or various versions of it. Is there anything in here that changes at all our relationship with Kaiser?
No, I don't think so. I think, as Lisa was saying, if we're concerned about the possibility of Kaiser proposing an urban growth boundary expansion, this, if anything, would strengthen our position because it talks about the UGB as a whole, and that there's a adequate land in the UGB as a whole to account for our employment needs as a whole. So,
Okay, thank you.
yeah.
So, does anyone have any questions or concerns? If not, Rules Committee is spoken in regards to how work sessions take place, and we can make motions and vote on things as long as it's not a final decision. So I would entertain a motion to initiate the process to approve the EOA then.
So moved.
Moved by Member Bednar, seconded by Councilor Dickey. Any further discussion on said? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries unanimously. And that brings our work session to a close. We have about 20 minutes, so we'll go into recess until 6:30. Good evening and welcome to the City of Salem Urban Renewal Agency meeting this evening. Mayor Peterson is absent. I'm Brad Nanke. I will be acting as Mayor Pro Tem this evening. And with that, if the recorder could call the roll.
Board Member Bennett.
Here.
Board Member Anderson.
Present.
Board Member Nanke.
Here.
Board Member McCoy.
Here.
Board Member Dickey.
Here.
Board Member Benjamin.
Here.
Board Member Bernards.
Here.
Board Member Lewis.
Here.
And Chair Peterson is absent.
Thank you. If you would please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Board Member Bennett will be acting as Council President for the Urban Renewal meeting, and Councilor Bennett will be acting as Council President for the City of Salem Council meeting to follow. With that, I would entertain a motion to approve this special meeting agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Member Bednar, seconded by Member Dickey. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries unanimously. We have no additions, deletions to the Urban Renewal Agency agenda, so we will move forward. No reports to boards and commissions, no public comment. Brings us to the consent calendar. Member Bennett.
Mr. Mayor, I move the consent calendar.
Second.
Moved by Member Bennett, seconded by Member Bednars. The only item on the consent calendar this evening is adoption of the fiscal 2015-2016 Salem Urban Renewal Agency budget resolution number 15-1, which will be voted on as we vote the consent calendar. Is there any discussion regarding said? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries unanimously. No other action items, no information reports, no special orders of business, no unfinished business, no public hearings, no new business, and hence, we will adjourn. Just that quick, just that easy. Let the recorder get situated for a shift over. All right, we will go ahead and call to order this meeting of the Salem City Council. Tonight is June 22nd, 2015. Would the recorder please call the roll?
Counselor Bennett.
Here.
Counselor Anderson.
Here.
Counselor Nanke.
Here.
Counselor McCoy.
Present.
Counselor Dickey.
Here.
Counselor Benjamin.
Here.
Counselor Bernards.
Here.
Counselor Lewis.
Here.
And Mayor Peterson's absent.
Thank you. I would entertain a motion to for approval of additions, deletions to the agenda.
So moved.
Just a minute.
Oh.
Let me correct them for a second. I know you're in a hurry tonight, but you'll miss a bet on that one. Mr. Mayor, I'll move additions, deletions, and revisions. I do want to point out correction to the yellow sheet, the cover sheet on those. 3.3 should be 3.2 resolutions. And that makes 3.2D the change. Okay? And that is correct on your council agenda.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Bednarz. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries unanimously. Now comes that time for council and city manager comment. Councilor Anderson.
Thank you, Acting Mayor Nanke. My wife Jessica and I are members of the NAACP, and as such, we were already planning to go to the Juneteenth picnic and celebration in the Salem Riverfront Park last Saturday, and the tragic events of the few days before that in Charleston made it even more imperative that we went, and it was very important that there was a service there in remembrance of the people who, in my view, were victims of domestic terrorism in the Charleston church. And I was pleased to see Acting Mayor Nanke there, Judge Aiken was there, lots of Salem citizens were there, but what was most pleasing to me is in this tragic circumstances were the presence of the Salem Police Department. And I'm sure they were there for somewhat protection and crowd control, but that's not the only reason they were there. And I spoke with Deputy Chief Belshaw, Deputy Chief Chip, whose last name escapes me, thank you, and a lieutenant and some sergeants and some people who were there genuinely serving, and I commend the police department, and I talked to those people specifically and told them how I appreciate that one of the buzzwords in the Salem Police Department's literature is compassion, and I think that comes from the chief down, and I think that's an extremely important service that the Salem Police Department gives to our citizens. And so I see the chief here and I'm commending him, and I'm asking that he pass that down to all of the people who serve under him. So it was a tragic event, and I'm glad that we could do something to show solidarity and respect for the victims. Thank you.
There was also a large number of faith community leaders there as well. We have a nice picture with the pastors and police, and had a couple of bike officers as well that ride through the park. So some good photos. Need to make sure they get posted up on our webpage. Councilor Bednarz.
On a little lighter note, this last Saturday I was able to attend the Sikh Day Parade. It was quite a celebration for the Sikhs that come out. Actually ended the walk from their temple to Gilmore Field, down near South High. They had food, free food at that. Wonderful time, wonderful get together with the community. And this is a natural segue. Next weekend, June 27th and 28th, will be the World Beat celebration down at Riverfront Park, celebrating a multitude of cultures in our world, much less in our own community. I believe this year's theme is around tempo or beats. They're going to be having different drums, different types of music that celebrate rhythm. So anyway, next weekend's a great time to have down there. We volunteer every year at the World Beat, and a great time if you have time to go down and see.
Excellent. I would say as a community emergency response team member that I would also encourage you to be a stay hydrated day, since it looks like we'll be approaching the 100-degree marks. Take plenty of water, drink plenty before, during, and after. Councilor Dickey.
Thank you. I just want to, I am doing a little research over the weekend and thinking about, we've been talking a lot about how to address homeless issues in our community. I know we have some folks here tonight to talk a little bit about what they're working on. I came across an interesting program, and I'm just going to throw this out there. I'm not making a motion or anything, but just for anyone's information and maybe this can spur some discussion. Salt Lake City has a program called HOST, slchost.org, and what they've done is they've taken their old parking meters that take coins, like some of those that we're going to be getting rid of around the Capitol Mall, and they've turned it into a program saying, turn your spare change into real change. And so if you want to give to homeless, you put it in there and it goes to a foundation that then helps disperse the money to organizations throughout the community that work with the homeless. I thought that was a brilliant idea. A lot of places are getting rid of old parking meters. So I just want to throw that out there. I thought it was real interesting looking at their website, and would just encourage everybody to take a look at it and see if that spurs any ideas or things that we might be able to do here in this community in a similar light.
Excellent. Yeah, I was actually in a telecommunications conference in Atlanta, and they had one right outside of the hotel we stayed in, and they're painted yellow so that you can differentiate them from a standard parking meter. And in talking with some of the locals as well, they said it's a wonderful way to give and make sure it actually goes to services rather than potential for alcohol or drug abuse. Any other comments? City Manager?
I just want to remind everyone, this will be our last meeting before the 4th of July, that the city is once again sponsoring the fireworks at Riverfront Park. That'll take place at about 10:15. The park will be open all day. We expect food vendors to be there by mid-afternoon, and we'll have some music and great events. So be sure to find out more on our website about the 4th and the activities associated with Riverfront Park.
Excellent. Councilor Benars.
I know in the wintertime we have drop-in shelters that we have when really cold weather is expected. Do we have anything planned for this really hot weather that we're expecting? I was looking at a 10-day calendar, and there's a whole string of days that'll be up right next to 100 degrees. Anything planned so far that we know of?
I'll ask Chief Nibelak to come and talk about that.
Thank you.
Fire Chief Nibelak. Yes, we actually put out a press release today about cooling shelters and where people can go, what places they can go to cool off, what they should do, drink a lot of water, stay out of the sun, don't go out in the middle of the day for a jog. There you go. So that press release went out on Flash News this afternoon. Okay. So the usual suspects, the library, we've got the library hours listed there, and other locations that are listed for them for places where people can go get out of the heat for a couple of hours. We suggest movie theaters, shopping malls. A lot of different places are available where they can get a break from the heat.
Frozen food section in the local grocery store. Excellent. Any other comments? Seeing none, we will move along to public comment. Yes. And we had no one signed up for that. We have 3 people signed up under public comment for agenda item 9, and without objection, I would have those all move forward at this time. Seeing none, we will start out with Mike Andrews.
Good evening, councilors. My name is Mike Andrews. I represent Rural Metro Ambulance, and our administrative building is at 1790 Front Street Northeast, Ward 1. Councilor Bennett, thank you. Rural Metro is transitioning out of the ambulance market here in Salem. And we just, both Aaron Monick and I, Aaron is the local general manager, and we just wanted to say a few words. First and foremost, we wanted to thank the council. We wanted to thank the city, as well as our partners with the fire department for the last 10 years. It's been great. We have long-lasting relationships, and it's hard to go. That being said, I wanted to leave you guys with a few facts that have happened over the last 10 years. So something like the partnership that you guys started and created with us has never really happened before on a scale throughout the country. In 2005, the eyes of the nation were on us, and it was an interesting start. And really, what blossomed over the last 10 years has been great. And not only the city, but the community should be very, very proud of what we've been able to accomplish. That being said, we have interesting facts as we have responded to 170,000 calls for service here over the last 10 years. That equated to about 135,000 transports. We have been lucky enough to employ roughly 90 employees here in the local area, and we were able to, with those 90 employees, we were able to afford to pay them around $18 million over the last 10 years. We've given thousands of dollars to the community, been great partners with the Better Business Bureau and the Salem Chamber, and we've really enjoyed our tenure here. So tonight, both Aaron and I would just like to say thank you, and would like to tell you guys goodbye. So as you see, our ambulance is the end of June, June 30th, 11:59 will be the last time that Rural Metro responds to any incidences, and the income company will transition in, and hopefully it will be a seamless transition. So we've been working very hard for that. So that being said, thank you very much. You guys have a good evening.
Thank you. And thank you for your service to the community over the last 10 years. I know it's increased our response time, so it's improved the longevity of several of our citizens along the way. Recognition from numerous angles as well. You truly were part of the community, and it showed in the volunteerism of your members, rehabilitation of a defunct warehouse, as well as recognition by several of the business and other organizations within the city. So thank you very much. Our paths may meet again. It's an open bid process on a frequent basis. I know it's been a wonderful thing for us. We were in dire straits 10 years ago, wondering how we would maintain our services as well. So thank you very much. Councilor Bennett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to join you in that. I think rural Metro set a real standard for the kind of relationship a private vendor can have with public service and public servants in our fire department, and we're very proud of what happened here. And really, in many ways, sorry to see them going, and look forward to them bidding again someday. Yep. I agree with you. They set a standard that we can only hope to see met in the future, and particularly a standard of, I think, showing a really graceful exit. That is really, you mentioned it, it is not just seamless, it has been, as I understand it, really a model of how this can be done, and done very, very well. So I don't think we can thank them enough for the quality of service and their commitment to this community.
And the transfer of a large number of their employees to the new provider as well. So a lot of those faces will be familiar. So excellent. Any other comments? We'll move on to Verena Wessel or Vessel, depending on the country of origin.
Well, it's brought on both counts, actually. You guys want to join me? Good evening, everyone.
And I had passed out some material onto your desktops earlier on this as well.
Okay.
Hold up the appropriate one first.
Right, okay. Good evening, Acting Mayor and members of the Council. My name is Verena Wessel. I'm with Northwest Human Services. I'd like to introduce Rebecca Maitland from the Reed Opera House and Capitol Center, and Pamela Watson, who's with the First Congregational United Church of Christ. We're here this evening to bring the health and sanitation and human rights issues being created by a lack of public toilets in the downtown area to your attention. You may or may not be aware of the recent efforts to address this issue by bringing concerned community partners to the table to discuss solutions to the issue. Partners include faith-based business and nonprofit entities. An article about this effort can be found in last week's issue of the Salem Weekly. Copies are available if you're interested in reading the article, and I think we have some on the back table. Currently, special events and activities have been deferred or moved elsewhere due to the condition of the alleyways downtown. The burden of dealing with this cleanup has landed with the downtown business and property owners. We believe that having facilities in the downtown core would contribute to increased opportunity and vibrancy of our historic downtown. Tonight, we are proposing a solution. We propose locating 7 porta potties Arta potties, as we're affectionately calling them, strategically in a 7-block radius of the downtown core. These potties could be wrapped in art, making them both functional and artistic. These facilities could be available to everyone visiting downtown, including those for special events. We're asking for the city to partner with us to provide safe, clean, and artistic places for people to toilet themselves, rather than using alleys or bushes when nature calls. And here's the ways that the city can help us. The city could agree to purchase and maintain potties on public or city-owned property. City staff could provide guidance on strategic placement of potties, including zoning or other ordinances. This would be most helpful for parties wanting to locate a potty on private property. Placement should promote use and appreciation of the artistic features. We encourage location in well-lit sites convenient to business and cultural amenities. I do want to thank several of Casey Duncan, Mark Bechtel of the city, who were gracious enough to meet with us. Also, Mayor Peterson, who in the past has taken this, has discussed this issue and brought it to people's attention. And again, we thank you for taking your time to listen to our concerns and considering our request. Respectfully, Rebecca, Verena, and Pam.
Thank you. Do we have any questions?
Oh, well, we have a couple signs here. This is our Arta Potty project, and Emily Goodnow is the pastor of the church, the First Congregation United, Associate Pastor, okay, sorry. But really, the idea is that we're going to have porta potties that can be wrapped in an artistic wrap that's either like, it can be historic, it can be aesthetically like trees or something like that, but so it would blend into the background. But the idea is that for visitors, events, and the homeless, people who want to enjoy our downtown could do that in a health and safe way. So this is the Arta Potty design with Emily in her robe. And the slogan here is Arta Potties, join the movement, and in the kingdom of God, everyone deserves a throne.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And staff has been in communications with you and council as well. So I know the mayor is very concerned about it. She brought it up in her State of the City last year. And Councilor Bernards and myself have communicated with other members out in the community to see what it takes to be able to make this happen. Because if they have no place, they'll find a place which is massively less than hygienic for themselves and others. So, Councilor Lewis.
My question is, how do you keep them working? And to be honest, the only example that I've seen that worked was in San Francisco, and I'm not recommending it, but it worked. They had them on the street, and to keep people from spending a whole lot of time in them, the doors were automated, and they only stayed closed for so long. So you had to go in, do your job, and get out, or the door opened.
Right.
Which kept them relatively clean. But I'm not recommending that idea. So, and I like yours, they look a lot better. The ones in San Francisco were aluminum, right in the middle of the street. And my poor daughter, she wasn't done and the door opened. Anyway.
I think, you know, that.
How do you keep them clean?
Well, we have a professional service that is partnered with us called Ace Chemical, and they service it like any other porta potty. They're very clean, as you can see. Like this blue is literally the first one that was delivered. We say it's like a naked baby. Then you have to learn to accessorize, right? So the first one has arrived here in Square on a temporary experimental basis, and we had a whole party. You showed up. So it's properly maintained. It's put under a light in front of God and everybody, literally in this case. But we intend to, the whole reason of this art wrap is to draw attention to them so they're not an eyesore to the city, and people don't, we look openly at all of the fears that people have about porta potties, but we think if they're lit, if they're bright, there's something to be proud of. We have the exterior that can be maintained, and we also have information addressing any fire code issues, because this is a professional company that does these, and so I think we can alleviate some of that concern and just make them presentable so that they're lit and can be used for everybody, but they will be properly maintained. They're not. It's a professional porta potty company that's offering a great rate for us to purchase the porta potties if we need to, and then, raise the money to wrap them. So
So is the, is the idea to maybe have a group or a group, like adopt one and?
Yeah, we'd have, you know, individual sponsors on a monthly basis, and then we'd have fundraising for the actual physical wrap that would last for years and be guaranteed for 2.
Could I speak to that? One of the things I want to add about that is that when we placed ours on Thursday in our parking lot at our church, we had several of our unsheltered neighbors that came over and thanked us profusely for giving them a place that they no longer had to use the bushes around our church and our alley by our church and everything. And the other thing is that I saw it as an opportunity for empowerment for them. They felt like they wanted to try to they wanted this to work, and they kept saying that we don't want to blow this. We want this to still to be here for us. And so, you know, there's an opportunity for self-governing, and several took it upon themselves to say that we are going to patrol, and if we see people sleeping in them or whatever. So it's an opportunity, too, to bridge a gap with our unsheltered friends, too, and make them feel that they're a part of this, a part of the community. And so we'll see. You know, we're willing to put it out there to see how it goes. Nothing's going to be perfect, but it sure beats having daily fecal matter and urine in the bushes around our buildings and our sidewalks and everything that we see growing more and more all the time.
Councilor Benars.
First off, I got to say that I did get a phone call this afternoon from a member of your church. I enjoyed the conversation that we had in reference to the support of this issue. Second, I want to let you know that I have, over the last 2 weeks since the last city council meeting, have sent out numerous emails to staff requesting information on policy, why we are locking our existing bathrooms. So having porta potties may be a temporary solution to a very permanent problem. What happens, or why are we locking them at night, and what happens if we don't lock them? And then exactly that, do you partner with somebody or some group that will take care of it in the meantime? What I've been told so far is they get ransacked and people lock themselves in for security reasons. I mean, the homeless are scared, so they lock the door shut, and they're safe for the night, that nobody can use it. So anyway, I'll let you know that I'm asking for information. Hopefully we'll get something out of staff here shortly.
Thank you. That's wonderful. Thank you.
Councilor Benjamin.
Have you identified the cost for each individual one and the ongoing maintenance costs?
Ace Chemical will sell us used clean porta potties like this blue one, really clean, $500, $20 a month maintenance fee. This is ridiculously low just for this project. Also, the guy who does the physical wraps is working with us to have a decreased amount. So, you know, it's really just getting proper codes being in the right place. If we need to be temporary, we can move them. You know, if right now existing temporary laws will, you know, property owners downtown are willing to move them around. We have a really disgusting problem in the downtown core that I represent that's never been this way, and we just have to do something. It's just a good neighbor thing all the way around. So we wanted to.
So is it like $20 a month just to clean it out?
$20 a month if we want more cleanup, and that's weekly cleaning. So if we have 7, we figured we only needed 7. Our goal was 7 from the river to the Capitol, because people come from the bridge and they come from Minto Brown and they come into the downtown core and they have nowhere to go. So it starts to lead them to her where the services are, each block and the way, but they're also usable for events, and they're properly maintained on the interiors where the exterior, and they're not like, you know, most porta potties, everybody like, you know, kind of eyesores and, you know, Igor looking terrible things. Well, these are meant to be really to alleviate some of those camping issues and camping out issues, because they'll be out really outstanding and, you know, in front of everybody, and community involvement, I think.
And so
is
what
huge.
you're asking is for the city is just to set up a way that we can bring these in and initiate this process, not necessarily asking for money.
No,
if possible.
Okay.
Yeah, if possible.
Well,
You know, in a perfect
right.
world, you would donate the
right.
porta potties, and we wouldn't have to buy them, and then we would raise the money for the artistic wraps to beautify our city and have them, you know, because we think, you know, it's an American problem. It's not just in Salem. You know, there's poop maps being delivered in, you know, Miami put one across the country, you know. San Francisco, but we're not that big. We have 7 blocks. We don't have 80 blocks, so we can make a significant difference, and we don't want more than enough. So that, you know, and we think that this will really help, and then really working together on cleanup plans so that no one's afraid, and we just be a progressive city dealing with our, you know, homeless neighbors.
Great, thank you.
Excellent. We could also just design one to look like a TARDIS for those Doctor Who fans, which was a police call box. But when nature calls, thank you very much for coming down.
Thank you.
And last on the list is Evan White.
I'm also a member of First Congregational Church with the Porta Potty, but that's not why I'm here. I want to thank you, Mayor Pro Tem and councilors, for your service to the city. And I'm Evan White, Land Use Chair of the Sunny Slope Neighborhood Association. Last week at our annual meeting, we were very honored to have Dr. Christensen and Mr. Glenn Davis, of Public Works as our guests. They presented a draft of a proposed grading ordinance. Over the past several years, the Community Development Department has been updating and streamlining our land development ordinances. Some parts of the UDC, or the Unified Development Code, raised policy issues, and these were put into a bucket list to be considered at a later time. This included SRC 65, our excavation and fill ordinance, which is currently written, protects only City of Salem property and not homeowner property. This is unfortunate because the risk of earth movement is not covered on homeowners' insurance policies. The new grading ordinance is focused on large projects with a greater risk of causing harm. Public Works consulted with the Home Builders Association and worked with other city departments. The proposed code is integrated with other city ordinances and draws upon the Oregon Structural Specialty Code, as well as sections of the Portland and Seattle grading codes. And the team has done a great job. I look forward to reading the staff report when it comes out, and to the public hearing, which I hope will lead to your adoption soon of the proposed grading code. It will be welcomed, especially by those who live in the hilly sections of South and West Salem. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. White. Councilor Benares has a question.
Thank you, Evan, for coming down here. We met a few years ago when I was running for a campaign, and you had...
I can't remember that at all.
You had an issue, and this was near and dear to your heart. I'm really pleased to see that your perseverance in this issue has actually come to an ordinance that's going to come to a fruition, hopefully here in the next few weeks as it comes before us. But it sounds like you've, tell me a little bit more about basically what the ordinance does and doesn't do, and where you got the information to make our ordinance.
Well, it basically adopts best practices in grading that are accepted throughout the Pacific Northwest, in fact, throughout the West Coast, which sets sort of a limit, which is currently in other city codes of you can grade up to a 2 horizontal to 1 vertical slope, but if you want to go beyond, without any trouble, but if you want to go beyond that, you have to kind of prove by means of a certified professional that the slope is going to be stable. And there are other provisions, benching, cutting a little notch in the hill to allow water to be drained off the slope, which over time makes the slope more stable.
As I read the proposed ordinance, it excluded things like fence posts, if you wanted to put a fence post, the logical exceptions.
Right, yeah. There's a lot of things that are excluded because they pose no public safety issue at all.
Okay. Well, thank you for working on this so diligently for at least 4 years. I know you've been on it probably longer than that, as far as I know. So thank you.
Thank you.
Definitely thank you, and we look forward to seeing you when it does come back here again. I'm sure you'll have some more comments for us at that time, and we look forward to that as well. Thank you. Okay, that completes our public comment. And that takes us to the consent calendar. Councilor Bennett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move the consent calendar.
Second.
There was 2 items.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, and we have 3.3A pulled by Councilor Lewis, and 3.3C, Councilor Dickey recuses herself on this issue.
And that was a 3.3E. My handwriting is probably less than.
No, I guess
Yes,
it's C
E
because
for
it's
Councilor Lewis's pull.
Oh, is it E for Lewis?
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
And then
Did
C
look
for the
like an A.
recusal for Councilor Dickey regarding a conflict of interest for the
Okay.
family member who's a member of said organization. Just to have that on the record. Okay, so with that being the motion, the second was Councilor Benars. Any discussion thereof? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries unanimously. If I can just kind of do a backwards jump on that, the bulk of the consent calendar was adoption of the fiscal year 15-16 budget and some continuing appropriations, mostly resolutions to make sure we stay running and move some of those purchase orders and projects that hadn't been completed this year into next year. Councilor Benars.
As I did 2 weeks ago when we were talking about the proposed budget, it is a big deal. It's roughly $110 million in the general. But I want the public to know that we have been talking about this. We had a budget committee. We've worked on this thing for about 6 months, 5 months. So it's not going over lightly. Tonight is the final adoption of the 2015-16 budget starting July 1st. So don't think we're not thinking about it, not discussing it. We have vetted it immensely.
And we had a public hearing on that last meeting, and essentially this meeting was to get those final resolutions in place to solidify said budget for next fiscal year. So we have no special orders of business. Special orders would be the pull, or the unfinished business would be the pull? Oh, did I rotate a page here? Sorry. Okay. With that, we have a public hearing on land use fees and charges for planning and division and public works. I will have the, yes?
Did we vote on the consent calendar?
No. Did we not?
Yeah. No.
Okay, we were just having, okay. Yeah, we did.
No.
No? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries unanimously. Did we not? Okay, excellent. Well, then we're in order now for public hearings. And if the city recorder will announce that.
The Salem City Council will now hold a public hearing to receive public testimony regarding setting land use fees and charges for the Planning Division and the Public Works Department for fiscal year 2015-2016.
Thank you. Staff report.
Yes. Good evening. My name is Lisa Anderson Ogilvie. I'm the Urban Planning Administrator in the Planning Division. So we are having a public hearing tonight to discuss land use fees. A public hearing is required for land use fees if they're going to be increased. So we are proposing a 6.2% increase for all of the Planning Division fees, except for historic design review fees and except for appeal fees. Those will remain the same. Also, the fees to be considered tonight, there's a handful of public works fees that are related to land use. They would be going up 2.41% to reflect the consumer price index. The reason the planning fees are going up more than the 2.41, if some of you were here last year, you'll remember that we embarked on a 5-year plan to get to 50% cost recovery in the Planning Division from our fees. So last year was the first year. This year would be the second year, and we would be estimating that we are, at the end of this fiscal year, so in about 2 weeks, we'll have gotten to 44%, about 44% cost recovery. So if you approve the fee increase for next year, starting in July, we will achieve 45% next year. So we'll still be on track to be at 50% within 5 years. We also added a few line item fees in the report. They're not new fees. It's just clarifying what the fee is for a few different things like awnings and porches and manufactured dwelling permits. So that's what we have tonight. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
No one is signed up to testify. Do we have any questions of staff? Councilor Anderson.
Thank you. I think I've done the math on this, Lisa. The 6.2% increase is 6.2% of 43.8%. to get us to 45?
Yes.
Okay. So I presume it'll be a like increase, similar each year, percentage-wise, to get us up to the 50%.
Yes.
I was present, not a member of the council, but I was present at the council meeting last year when we talked about this, and I'm interested in how the council, I presume, arrived at the goal of 50%. If you could, maybe that's not what for you to say, but I also am interested in what are the percentages that other like municipalities recover from the fees we're talking about? I see that maybe Director Gross can answer that.
Perhaps I can answer that. I'm Glenn Gross. I'm the Community Development Director, and I was the planning administrator when we brought this to council and proposed the plan to get to 50% cost recovery. This was based on a discussion that I had with some members of our development community. Actually, City Councilor Lewis was one of the people that I consulted with. And first of all, let me answer your question about the other communities. They're all over the board. There's no set uniformity as far as most of them do this or that. Some don't even worry about cost recovery. Some do, but they don't necessarily get 50%. It could be less. Some go for more than that. A few. In the discussions I've had over the years with the development community, it's kind of a two-edged sword. On the one hand, they recognize that they're getting a service and it's appropriate to pay for the service as a fee. But on the other hand, they also point out, and I think rightfully so, that the planners that work in development review don't just process applications, but they man the permit application desk, they answer phones, they answer general questions from the public, they provide a general service that probably, in my opinion anyway, is rightfully paid for by the general fund. So where's the right balance? I propose 50% as a starting point. Let's see if we can get to 50%. Half of it then is on the general fund, and the other half is on the land use applicant. When we started this process, we were getting about 40% cost recovery. So over the 5-year period, if it takes 5 years, it may not take 5 years, by the way. If we grow by more than we expect to grow, we could get it in 4 years or something. But in any case, if we can get to 50%, we can always have another discussion about, is that where we want to stay, or is there another goal to shoot for? But that's kind of how we got there.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. That's a comprehensive answer. I'm wondering, in light of the discussion about not all the planners' time is spent on the specific planning issues for various developers as opposed to general service things that they would do. Do you have any idea of how that time is actually split up with the planners, the use of the planners, or not?
Well, maybe Lisa, being closer to it these days than I am, could give you an answer. I think it's probably most of the time they are working on land use applications. It's a smaller percentage of their time, maybe, I don't know, 15, 20%, that they're either dealing with the public in general, or they could be processing code amendments. As we have on our agenda tonight a code amendment that will facilitate land use eventually, but it isn't something that we charge a fee for. So.
I would agree with that, yes.
Thank you very much.
Councilor Lewis.
Yeah, not a question, but maybe a comment to add. The conversation, I want to remind everybody, the conversation started about 4.5 years ago when there weren't a whole lot of applications. One, maybe. And at the time, it was very sensitive. The home builders were not doing the best from a historical standpoint. I want to commend the staff, Lisa and Glenn especially, for getting the point across that, that we needed to move towards, at the minimum, the 50%, but being very patient and working with the development community to hold off the implementation until, quite frankly, until now, not knowing where we would be now. But fortunately, there is a little bit improvement in the building, and so implementation is now, and so it's coincidentally going to be all right, but not knowing then anything other than we had to move towards this. So I think it worked out well, and I appreciate their willingness to work with the building community.
Excellent, thank you. Any further questions of staff? Hearing none, we will close this public hearing and deliberate in due course. Councilor Bennett.
Mr. Mayor, I move the staff recommendation to adopt Resolution 2015-22 setting land use fees and charges for the Planning Division and the Public Works Department.
Second. Moved by Councilor Bennett, seconded by Councilor Benars. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries unanimously. Moves us on to our second public hearing. If the recorder could please introduce that.
The Salem City Council will now hold a public hearing to receive public testimony regarding proposed amendments to Salem Revised Code, Chapter 7, related to downtown parking district.
Thank you. Do we have a staff presentation? Are we looking for said staff?
Good evening, council members and
Thanks.
Mayor. Mayor Pro Tem. Sandra Montoya, Assistant Finance Director. We have before you consideration of Ordinance 1215, engrossed Ordinance 1215, and we're requesting that you receive public testimony and consider adoption. For the most part, it's primarily housekeeping. It's questions that we receive every year, and we're just trying to make the language simpler for folks to understand. We do have one change that's probably, that came about, I think, in the last week or two, and that is doing away with monthly payments for those that are under $425 a bill for a year. And we're just doing that, again, for simplification, for streamlining, and that affects about 10% of the customers. So I do want to make sure that we disclose that. We do have some customers that will be impacted that used to be monthly, and now we would be asking them to make a lump sum payment. And I'm sorry, I've got allergies going on, so. So with that, I would entertain any questions.
Do we have any staff or no public signed up to testify? Do we have questions of staff? Actually, I have one in regards to those 10% of folks that you were just discussing. That option is not available through the e-payments for them then either.
So what we're doing is having those that are $425, which is the minimum, we're just having them do a lump sum. So e-payment option is still available, but monthly goes away for them. And we have 10%, so 423 customers that are on lump sum that already pay lump sum. And then we have about 50 customers that are at that $425 level that do a monthly payment. So we'll have to do a special letter to them and let them know that there's a change in that. Okay. And that was part of the engrossment that happened.
All right, thanks. Any other questions?
Yeah.
Councilor Bennett.
There is. For those folks, will there be any way for them if in fact it proves that a lump sum payment, at least the first year, is an initial hardship to continue some sort of timed payment, or will that just absolutely go away?
So the way the ordinance reads right now, that would go away. You as council certainly have the option to change that. And I'll look to the city attorney to tell us what language changes we would have to make.
If council would like to make a motion to amend it, obviously we can do that and bring it back for an engrossed, further engrossed ordinance of that in the next meeting. If you just give us your general direction, what you want us to do, we can figure out the wordsmithing.
Well, what's the implication of this handful of people making monthly payments? Is it just the bookkeeping cost? Why are we?
It is. Right now, we have actually quite a bit of, and I don't have the percentage for you, so I apologize, that end up getting reminders where we are having to, invoice routinely, and also the way that the ordinance reads is it penalizes you pretty heftily for not making those payments, again, because we're trying to disincent people from being late with that payment. So they have interest and they have a penalty, but for those that are on that $425 minimum payment, we're talking pennies that get added every month, and so invoicing multiple times for those pennies just becomes a little bit more cumbersome. So we're just trying to streamline that collection process.
Okay. Thank you.
Actually, if I can follow that up with another, have we notified those 50 people at all that we're doing anything?
So we've done the public notice, and we are getting ready to send letters based on the actions taken tonight. So we would do a special letter for those customers that have been on monthly payments that would now be on a lump sum.
Do they know?
Yeah, I mean, we have no one here to testify, and it may be that they don't really know what they may have to come up with, $420 some straight up. I saw a couple other hands. Councilor Dickey, Benjamin, Lewis, followed by McCoy.
So just kind of along those same lines, when does this take effect, and how long would the people that would have to turn around and pay a lump sum, would they have, is this like January, so they'd have several months, or would they have to come up with $425 next month, or?
So we would send out the invoices. The letters would go out this month. The invoices would go out at the end of July, and they'd have till the end of August to make that payment.
So they basically would have about a month, a little over a month, to come up with $400 or less, depending on what they pay.
That's true. Most of the tenants in the downtown area are tenants that have been there, or owners, or that have been, occupants that have been there for a while. However, there is turnover in the downtown, so it may catch some by surprise.
So if they sign up for e-payment, then they can pay monthly. That's options
right.
totally off the table.
Right. The minimum customers, the $425 customers, theirs is a lump sum payment. For those others that have a larger amount due, they still have the monthly or the annual payment option, and certainly on the ePay website, just like we do in banking, you can select other frequencies of payment, and that is still an option for them. They would just be paying those in advance and not in arrears.
So the people that pay $425 or whatever, they have to pay that lump sum, or they can't just do like a half year kind of thing, pay 50% through an e-payment or a monthly e-payment. So the bookkeeping is that costly if they go right to e-payment, where we just zap the account?
Well, so it's just
every month.
Constant vigilance over those accounts, reporting on, okay, who's paid, who hasn't paid, which ones need to be re-invoiced, what sort of contact do we have to do. It's bookkeeping and it's collection.
Well, doesn't typically a bank, if you get, if an e-payment or a request for funds goes to a bank for $20 and there's only 15 in there, the bank will pay it and you'll get your 20. But of course, then the person that got on the account has to pay $38 overdraft fee and stuff like that. So
really, that just depends on individual a checking account status. It's not. I would say that for customers that are in good standing, the bank may make that courtesy, and that's really dependent on the bank, their rules, and the type of customer that you are. I don't know that that's the case for every customer.
Thank you.
Councilor Lewis?
Has there been any thought about offering if you go to a once-a-year payment, offering a discount for early payment?
That has not been a topic of discussion.
Councilor McCoy.
A couple questions. I understand why when it was $100 or less, you didn't want to do monthly payments of $8 or $9, but when you raise it to $425, I guess I'm a little lost in why now all of a sudden you can't do a monthly payment. It's $40. So I'm a little puzzled with the rationale there, especially when it's 4 times bigger than it was before, but you don't want to screw with it now. Could you give me some insight there?
I'm happy to make that adjustment and return it to monthly payments.
Okay.
Quite honestly, the engrossment happened while I was gone, so I can't speak to the reasons why.
Okay. I have one more question.
Yes.
And this goes to the credits. It says if you're not there for a full year, you get a credit for the tax, for that portion of the tax. I'm assuming, so if you move in, if you move out, is that,
Yes,
if you pay
yes.
your $400 and you move out 3/4 of the year, you got $100 coming back?
Correct, and they just
Okay.
asked for a refund.
And they have to ask, but there's new language in here. You're aware they have a refund coming?
We
Yes or
actually
no?
don't know when they come or go.
Okay.
We do canvassing of the downtown, and it doesn't happen, the canvassing doesn't happen every month. We probably try and do it once a quarter, but so we don't always catch who's come or gone until that canvassing
Okay.
occurs.
My question is, because the new language is they have to ask for it or they're not going to get it.
Correct.
And they have to ask it within 60 days or they don't get it. So a couple things, you're putting it on them. You got to better make sure then that they are aware that this is going to happen. But I'm not sure if they come there in 75 days when they realize they have $100 or $200 coming back, and you're not going to give it to them just because the 60 days went by. I guess I'm a little confused on why there'd be a 60-day limit on it if they figure it out and come to get their money.
And quite honestly, I think it's because we've actually had a couple of instances where someone's coming back years later asking for that credit. And it just seemed very logical to put some time limits on that, just accounting-wise, and limiting the amount of research that we have to do to verify that. So that was the reason why we put some parameters. If you're paying that tax, I mean, quite honestly, they don't like paying it. I wouldn't either. And so they tend to be pretty vigilant about what they're paying and making sure that they receive the credit. But in the couple of instances that we had, it was several years.
Okay. So in general, there isn't a problem in the folks getting their credit back if they move out early?
No. No, we have, I mean, if they're due the credit, they're due the credit. It's appropriate.
Give that some thought. I think maybe either make it longer, or why is that language in there if it wasn't, basically it wasn't a problem except for a couple, so now because there was a couple, the larger number are going to perhaps pay the price because a couple people figured it out 2 years later. Put a year on it then or something and let everybody else do their regular thing.
The city attorney wanted to
add one point of clarification to what Sandra had said. The engrossment changed the amount on page 2 of the ordinance from $400 to $425. The reason for that is that the minimum tax went up from $400 to $408. So that it's not changing from $100 to $425. It's changing from $400 to $425. And what Administrative Services said their basis for that, for doing a lump sum, is that it's just administratively inefficient to go after in collection and send reminder notices out, as opposed to doing it quarterly. You just do a lump sum and then it's due or it's not. That's obviously a policy choice for council, but as far as the amount, the minimum tax went from $400 to $408, and that's the reason for the engrossment.
Councilor Bennett.
Yeah, thank you very much for that explanation. I think that's important to remember. They've actually been under this 400 plus for 2 years. The only, I think the thing that concerns me is whether or not, because no one showed up tonight, and I know tomorrow when I walk downtown, they will have heard of it at that point. I'm just concerned that they will have heard about it too late. So I wondered, I want to make sure the notice that these 50 or several hundred, really it's several hundred because they could all choose to do monthly, those minimum payers got, were they notified that we plan to remove this monthly option for them? Do they know that tonight?
Not specifically. So they received a public hearing notice, but the public hearing notice didn't spell out the detail of, they'd have to read the staff report.
I am concerned about that, Mr. Mayor. I think all of the reasons for it make sense. I mean, as an administrative issue, I think the problem is that when you drop this on several hundred people, really, who discover they have no option no matter the condition of their business or their situation or their attitude about how they want to pay this, because I'm sure there are some who have the attitude, I'd like to pay it monthly, particularly when you're talking 30, 40 bucks a month. I guess if I was to change this, and I'd like to have some time to try, what I would probably look at is some sort of a year hiatus on the removal of the yearly or of the monthly payment, to make sure people know this is being talked about so they can come talk to us. Right now, I'm just, I'm thinking about one businessman in particular who never ceases to talk to me about this one, and rightly so. It's a part of his business cost. Got a small business downtown, and I'd really like to to let him know what absolutely is going on here. And it's certainly, if I had been really paying as close attention over the past few weeks as I should have been, I would have hunted him down and told him so he could come down here and yell at you instead of at me. So I would like to move that we postpone action on this to have a chance to come in with some amendments.
Councilor Bennett, can I make a suggestion?
Yep.
Could we just amend the table for the 425 and below to say lump sum or semi-annual and go forward with the rest of the ordinance? And then we can have that notice provided and come back with an additional amendment later on.
So they would owe 200 instead of 400? Is
Right,
that
which is basically what the code says now.
Is it?
Yeah, it's lump sum or semi-annual for that minimum payment. Because right now we're up against the deadline to have this in place by the time the new billings go out for this year. So if we
Is there any way to just pull out the question of you owe 425 annually and not describe the payment?
I'd rather have some specificity so people don't just wait till the 364th day to pay it.
Well, we appear to have a system in place that is chasing them down each month if they're not meeting their monthly obligation.
But if it's not due until the end of the year, if we left it ambiguous like that, you wouldn't have that. So if we just change it to the existing language to say lump sum or semi-annual.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds okay to me.
Councilor Anderson.
I'm sorry, we had a motion on the floor and I interrupted him.
Right,
So
and
have
you want to keep that as it is or rescind it for a little more discussion?
I'd like to hear more discussion.
Okay. I think I'm the only counselor who has yet to comment on this, and I can see both sides of it clearly expressed both by Ms. Montoya on it's costing the city a lot of money for negligible return on what you're getting, and the other counselor's concerns about has there been proper notice, and how can some businesses, it's a lot better for them to pay monthly because of the way the cash flow issues than it would be to pay yearly. I'm wondering if we might suggest something along the lines of what the city attorney suggested, but I would suggest quarterly payments rather than semi-annually payments, and I think that's $108 versus $36, so it's an increase, but not a huge increase, and it also then eaves up on the city in terms of how many times you have to check it. So I'm not moving that yet, but I think in light of the discussion that Councilor Bennett's talking about, I think that's something that is a good compromise that would satisfy the city's needs in terms of the procedural needs of getting something out there and in terms of the money cost, but would also help out the folks who, for various reasons, would like to still make graduated payments rather than a lump sum payment.
Councilor Dickey.
Thank you. Just to find out, is there a particular reason why some of these details were not sent out with the public hearing notice?
So I have to apologize. The change happened while I was gone on vacation. Deborah's gone now, so I can't ask her for the details. So she's on vacation. And I think we just didn't have the timing right to vet it. I think Dan, the city attorney, probably has more knowledge of the inside discussions, but I think really it was just procedural efficiency. We were trying to streamline the process and the cost of collecting for finance, and we're talking about a small population, but certainly from the constituent perspective, I can see the discussions that you're having, and they're meaningful, so we want to take that into consideration.
Follow-up?
Sure. So I guess maybe this kind of goes to our discussions about communicating with the public that we've been having for a couple years now. You know, and I can understand. I mean, this is just kind of a standard. I mean, from the outside, looks like just your basic standard, you know, ordinance amendment or whatever. But I think this is just a really good example of why we get in trouble with the public, because we don't put meaningful information out there. I mean, I follow the city of Salem on Facebook. I didn't see anything that specifically said, hey, you know, we're going to be changing the way we collect parking fees. Come on down to City Hall or anything like that, or whatever it is, wherever it is. So I just think this is an example of why we need to continue to work on improving our communication with the public. Whatever we decide to do here, this just really stands out to me as something that is a good example of that.
And especially since it's a smaller number of people, but it's also in a very interesting and fragile community in downtown right now with discussions on parking in general. Councilor Lewis, followed by Benars.
I'd be willing to bet that there are, of that small group of folks, a certain number of them that are watching this tonight. So the idea that this is going unnoticed is not logical. I have a question for the city attorney. The seemed to be the semi-annual would work in your scenario. Would the quarterly work just as well, or does that make things more difficult?
Quarterly's fine.
Okay. I believe the quarterly feels better, makes more sense. It's going to be objected to no matter what we put through. It's going to be objected to by some, but I would like to see the quarterly. It makes sense, and I think it gets us to a point where we can move forward tonight.
Councilor Benars.
So I too would support that motion if it ever comes to the floor.
I'm ready to make it.
It looks like that's ready to happen. Councilor Anderson.
I move we pass the ordinance as proposed, with the exception of allowing quarterly payments for those who owe the minimum fee amount due.
I second. I did have a second comment, and I think we have a discussion at this point about the motion.
Yes.
And that had to do with
From the maker of the motion, if he so chooses.
No, I've already said my piece,
Okay.
and we need to get this going, so now we've got something on the floor where we can talk
Okay,
about it.
discussion.
My other question was about giving notice, giving proper notice. Are we talking 50 or are we talking 200 people that have these permits right now?
We would be giving notice to everyone at the minimum level, because they could each make that option.
So we're talking about 200 letters is what I'm saying?
It's actually close to, it's between 400 and 500 customers that right now are on the minimum, but about 425 choose to make a lump sum payment at the moment.
So my point was that the prudent thing might be is to have given those 400 and some odd notice directly by mailing.
Yes, and we will follow up with that and
Okay.
make sure that they get that notice.
Thank you.
The concern,
Councilor,
sorry, Mr. Mayor. The concern I would have at this point is what the notice will be is you owe quarterly. We can't, because of the nature of what we're doing tonight, we're moving to second reading. Would you like to hold off on this?
No. I'm good with quarterly. I think hindsight, it would have been better if those letters had been sent for so few individuals that were out there and such a delicate situation in downtown right now.
Yeah.
So skip the letters for these people for this issue because we'll have voted on it tonight, hopefully.
Well, and everyone will get a letter
Correct.
being notified
and so
of
the
what's
change that we've made is actually a more conservative, easier on the wallet change, because right now it's either lump sum or semi-annual, and so now we're opening lump sum or quarterly. So it's a less amount if they choose the quarterly. They're smaller payments.
Because right now they may be paying $12.50, and now they would have the ability to pay.
But
100. Yes, Councilor Anderson.
But I thought, Sandra, that some people are paying, they're not paying semi-annually or lump, they're paying 12 times.
Approximately 50.
So even though the ordinance says you can pay in lump or semi-annually, someplace under that, we're allowing people to pay 12 times a year.
I'm sorry, you're right.
Okay,
Correct.
okay. So now what we would be doing is going from 12 times a year to 4 times a year.
Correct.
If I can clarify, the current code has 3 different payment levels. $100 or less, which frankly doesn't apply anymore, which is why we're updating the ordinance. If it's $100 or less, it's lump sum or semi-annual. Under the current code, if it's $100 to $400, it would be lump sum, semi-annually, or quarterly. Same for over $400, lump sum, semi-annually, or quarterly. What you're proposing is to allow the $400 range, the minimum payment folks, go to annual, lump sum, or quarterly. And the rest of the folks would still be under the same terms. You're giving them more flexibility. You're giving them the flexibility to pay quarterly, and that's fine.
Councilor Bennett has suggested I say semi-annually or quarterly, if that would make a difference at all to you as city attorney.
It's your discretion.
Yeah, I'll add semi-annually or quarterly. And I presume I'm amending my own motion, and does the seconder still second it?
Well, that was annually, semi-annually, or quarterly.
Lump sum,
correct?
yeah.
Lump sum as an annual.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, the terms, I got a question, and so the terms of this are the same for everybody now?
Right.
Okay, that's all that you had changed it, or that someone had changed it, to annually solely for the 425.
Correct.
Okay, now everybody gets treated the same.
Correct.
Okay, good. Good motion.
Councilor McCoy? Yep.
Monthly goes away.
Yeah.
Monthly goes away.
That's what I was
Replaced by quarterly.
For the minimums.
Or semi-annual, or lump sum. Any other discussion?
So with that engrossment, I can do the engrossment, and we can come back and do second reading at the next meeting.
Great.
You can close the hearing tonight, unless you wanted to continue the hearing, because we're going to send notice out to these folks.
Councilor McCoy.
So the next when's the billing? The next meeting's the 13th, right?
Correct.
So you can't bill till after the 13th?
We wouldn't be billing until,
We would be billing after the decision is made.
Okay, so in this it says the lump sums are due by July 30th. You're going to bill on the 13th? Is that going to fly well with anybody?
sounded like
Just
we were
pointing it
having them
out.
due at
We
August
would adjust the
31st.
dates as well.
So does that need to go into a motion if we're adjusting the dates on this?
I can correct that.
As directed to be included in a future engrossment.
I would
So
like
directed.
clarification whether you're going to keep the hearing open or not.
I would prefer to close it and let staff bring back an engross for second reading, but it's the will of the council.
You know,
Councilor Bennett.
well, I hate to, I don't know. My concern is for a lot of people, this will be their notice of kind of what's going on. But I think because we're equalizing it across the board, everybody's getting treated the same, we probably ought to just move ahead. There is no 12-month payment cycle under our ordinance at all. I don't know where that came from and why that was allowed to continue, and how we were charging people interest and penalties on something that didn't exist in the ordinance. So I'd like to get it cleaned up. It sounds to me like it can be cleaned up now fairly across the board.
Councilor Anderson.
In addition, we're not changing the amount due, we're just changing a method of payment. So anybody who's running a business is going to say, over the course of the year, I've got to pay X dollars for this fee. And how they pay it, to me, especially with giving them the quarterly amount, I think that, you know, should resolve all those kind of issues.
Councilor McCoy.
Being a new guy on this, I haven't gone through a full cycle here, but one of the things that sort of a pattern here is sort of waiting to the last minute to get some of this stuff done. I mean, if you knew you wanted to change this, why are we coming, you know, 2 weeks or a week and a half before we're still supposed to do the annual billing, so we can't even get the, you know, the ordinance done in time to do a regular annual billing? Now we're pushing dates around and horsing around with all kinds of stuff. If we knew we were going to do this, why didn't we see it in May? So we could have done this in an orderly fashion, just been done with it. There's a pattern here of that too going on, and I sometimes don't understand it. You feel like we're now under fire to get something done when we could have done this in a lot more measured, orderly manner and not had to deal with this kind of stuff.
I can be a little mea culpa on that. This came to the department, the legal department, in early May, and there was a delay on our end.
And the point is well taken. There was a future report that went out before the previous council meeting, so it would have been sometime in early June that this report should have gone public.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, can you call the question on your own motion? I'm not sure if that's Robert's.
Well, and the public hearing is actually still open at this point.
Yeah. So
would it be appropriate to close and then restate said motion? Or that's to modify the piece that we're looking at, so.
Right, so you can make the motion right now just to modify the ordinance.
Okay.
And then have a motion on whether or not you want to close the hearing. And if you're going to send notice out to all these folks, tell them we're considering second reading of an engrossed ordinance, but you can't testify to it.
That defeats the whole purpose of the ordinance in terms of amount spent by staff time.
Is it possible to continue the hearing and then have second reading at the same meeting?
Yes. It's not advisable, but we can do it.
I'm just wondering if no one shows up for the public hearing, the continuance, and we're looking at the engrossed again.
Well, right now, we have a motion on the floor, and we ought to vote on that motion because there's no motion to postpone, there's no motion to table, there's a motion on the floor, and we've discussed it.
Okay. Without objection, vote on the motion. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries unanimously.
I move we close the public hearing. Is that correct now? That's the appropriate time?
Sure.
Yeah, I move we close the public hearing and proceed to second reading.
Seconded by Councilor Benars. Discussion, maker of the motion?
No, we've beat this one pretty much to death on my side.
Councilor Benjamin.
Well, I hope to keep it open for written comment.
I don't know if it would serve a real purpose.
Okay, never mind.
Okay. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. 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 Opposed, nay. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you.
Just
and staff will bring back an engrossed ordinance bill adjusting and adding quarterly and adjusting dates. And it will come back as engrossed for second reading.
Thank you. That was the question I was going to ask, was where does this really sit us at this point? And I think you stated it correctly.
Yes, I'll email it out to you so you have as much notice as you can get on it.
In small words, you know, single syllable words or less.
Per email.
Yeah.
Okay. Where does that take us?
Second reading.
That takes us to our poll 3.3E by Councilor Lewis.
I would move staff recommendation.
Second.
Moved by Councilor Lewis, seconded by Councilor Menards.
And,
Care to discuss the motion?
Really, I believe I understand this. It's a little different than SDC's situation like this. The developer would be charged with some fees, but really what I'm looking for is kind of a common sense explanation of how this would work. It's my understanding that the city would make an agreement with a proposed developer that they would postpone fees, but they would not be, the fees would not be waived. And I just want to make sure that I'm understanding it correctly, and if so, I think this is a good idea to motivate further, make Mill Creek attractive. But I'm looking for kind of a common sense explanation, and I'm not sure who to turn to, so.
Looks like Director Bechtel's ready to give that explanation.
Thank you. Interim Urban Development Director Mark Bechtel. Yes, Councilor, as the city manager and I have been going out and meeting with different site selectors and professionals and learning about how we can better incentivize development at Mill Creek. One of the suggestions that we were told was that our development district fees, which are the same as SDCs, but they're outside of the SDC area, so they're in their own development district. Mill Creek has its own development district. So those fees are due as a lump sum at the time of building permit. And so that can be a large amount of money. So if it's, for example, if it's a very large parcel and development of of an industrial parcel, that can be a very large single payment of funding of development district fees. And so one of the suggestions we were given was, could we provide an option to a future developer of paying those fees over time so that it's not such a large hit at building permit time. And so what we are proposing, and the State Department of Administrative Services has agreed with us, is that we have the ability to take those large chunks of development district fees and allow payment of those fees over up to 60 months. So we would work out an arrangement or an agreement with a future developer as to the order of payment of those fees. And then that's an incentive to them to have them have more time to come up with that money. In some cases, have their operation up and running before some of those fees are due. Also, it would allow us to set the fee and lock it in so that they have more certainty when it comes to the financing of their development of that industrial site as to what the fees will be. So this is simply just a way that allows us to incentivize development, gives us some flexibility to deal with potential large industrial users, and provides them some convenience in addressing those development fees.
And I, second question, if I could, I'm assuming we're in a position to do this because of the investment the city has put into the area.
That's correct, Councilor. Yeah. We take these development district fees, and again, just a little bit of what they are. Mill Creek Corporate Center is not within the purview of SDCs because it was always state-owned property. And so when all the modeling occurred for system development charges, they were always considered state property, which would not, in a sense, develop. Now that that property has been set apart for development, we have put in place a development district. So the fees that are paid are essentially in lieu of SDCs or equivalent to SDCs. And that allows us to take that money and build the infrastructure within the corporate center for the internal roadways, for improvements to the boundary street areas, water lines, sewer lines, and so forth. So the theory is that as properties are taken down and developed, the development fees help pay for the infrastructure necessary to further develop the corporate center in phases. And what we did is we ran the scenario of paying fees over time through our model, and the model supports being able to do that. We can still provide the infrastructure on the as-needed basis with a phased development fee payment. So it's a win-win for both the city, the state, and for the developer.
All right, thanks.
Any further questions of staff? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carried unanimously. We have couple of information reports. There was also one that was added on to in additions, and I had just a brief question on that in regards to Reed Road access and the timing thereof, knowing that I get complaints on a very frequent basis as to the narrowness of said road and how big of a death trap it is. So I didn't get a chance to read through a lot, but it's to actually put in another driveway onto Reed close to Strong, or accessing from Strong and coming out onto Reed. It was confusing because it was a real quick add-in today. Actually, it's the very last page of addition shows the vicinity map, and then Chapel Lane.
Yes, Robert Chandler, Assistant Public Works Director, and Attachment 1 and Attachment 2 of the staff report show the locations, and it is an additional driveway onto Reed Lane, basically south of Strong Road.
But it doesn't really, when I look at Attachment 1, there's no reference to where that is on Reed.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Where within Reed Road, and we can get a better map to show you the location of it. I don't have that information specifically here. I have the staff report as you do.
Okay. Yeah, I just know that there's concern along Reed Road, and the hopes that development would happen because the next development on that site, Simpson Hills essentially, enables that widening and street improvement to take place.
That's right.
What's the timing on this actually look like if we wanted some further information? I hesitate to call things up and have lots of attorneys come in here. If no one else has a concern with it, I could just inquire of staff and get a little more information on it as well, on location.
And we can send, Public Works can send to all staff members, all council members rather, a better map that shows the location on Reed Road where this driveway is. That's easy to do.
But the only attempt to call this up would be this evening.
That's correct. That's correct.
And Councilor Anderson.
Don't we have 30 days to call up from the decision?
Nope.
No. Okay, it's the next meeting. Okay.
Councilor Menard.
To help clarify a little bit, at least on Attachment 1, it does say that approximately 400 feet to the center line of Lindbergh Road. Yeah.
Where's Lindbergh Road on Attachment 2?
Where is Lindbergh Road?
It comes out, and I know it's a new street. I think it's barricaded at present. So it would be closer to the corner of Strong Road. Potentially an eighth of the way from Strong Road to, well, that looks just weird in general. Oh, no, the back page, that is Lindbergh Lane, because I was thinking that was Battle Creek.
Yeah. No, Battle Creek goes through.
Right, and it was like it stops there.
The road that stops there is Lindbergh Lane.
Correct.
Right. It's unnamed. It's unnamed in Attachment 2.
So, yes.
Well, so it's closer to Strong Road.
Yes.
You can actually use the scale in the bottom of Attachment 2
that's what
to
I'm
figure
using.
out where it is.
Right.
I know a little bit about this, and I thought I would share what little I know in case it might help. Yeah, that's about it to scale, yes. This, as I understand it, is a driveway to provide a second access to the existing school, Heritage School, on the Sustainable Fairview site. It is consistent, I'm told, with the adopted refinement plan for that portion of the Fairview overall plan.
Right.
And but the school is interested in having a second access now, not waiting for the overall development to take place. That's what's driving the property owner to request the access at this point.
Okay, and visibility right there is fine and traffic in and out of that facility isn't bad, so I'm okay with that at the moment. All right, thanks. Just when they come in late, and it has to do with the road that I know people have concerns with because it was difficult to actually understand that.
And I'm sorry,
Yes.
just one other little point. Counselor Anderson, the way the rule works is when a decision appears on your agenda as an information item, it only appears once, and that's when you have to call.
I understand.
Okay.
No, yeah, thanks. So we sort of could have avoided this a little bit by not putting it on at whenever it was made today. Then we could have had a better map and a little more further explanation. But I'm satisfied if Acting Mayor Nanke is satisfied because it's his ward. Yeah, Pro Tem, excuse me. The guy up there in the middle.
All right. Any other comments on information and reports? Seeing none, we'll move to first readings. If the recorder could read 81A.
Ordinance Bill Number 1515 relating to the commercial office zone, amending Salem Revised Code Section 521.005.
Councilor Bennett.
I move the staff recommendation.
Second. Seconded by Bednarz. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries unanimously. Moves us into 4 second readings, and I will turn that over to the city recorder.
Engrossed Ordinance Bill 1115 relating to parking for persons with disabilities, amending Salem Revised Code Section 102085. Councilor Dickey?
Aye.
Councilor Benjamin?
Aye.
Councilor Bednarz?
Aye.
Councilor Lewis?
Aye.
Councilor Bennett?
No.
Councilor Anderson?
Aye.
Councilor Nanke?
Aye.
Councilor McQuaid?
Aye.
We'll move to 8.2B.
So 8.2B was the hearing you just conducted, so that we're going to hold off on that one.
Correct.
Ordinance Bill Number 1315 vacating a portion of Rainier Drive Southeast. Councilor Benjamin?
Aye.
Councilor Bednarz?
Aye.
Councilor Lewis?
Aye.
Councilor Bennett?
Aye.
Councilor Anderson?
Aye.
Councilor Nanke?
Aye.
Councilor McQuaid?
Aye.
Councilor Dickey?
Aye.
And the final second reading then, 8.2B, or D, as in Douglas.
Ordinance Bill Number 1415 vacating a portion of First Street Northwest and Lincoln Avenue Northwest. Councilor Bednarz?
Aye.
Councilor Lewis?
Aye.
Councilor Bennett?
Aye.
Councilor Anderson?
Aye.
Councilor Nanke?
Aye.
Councilor McQuaid?
Aye.
Councilor Dickey?
Aye.
And Councilor Benjamin?
Aye.
Thank you. Follows into public comment for items not on the agenda. We had pulled up the folks who had signed up at the beginning of the meeting to that, or is there anyone else who wishes to speak to council on items not on the agenda? Seeing none. New business, there is a mayor's item. It's her appointments as per code as well to several of the commissions that are mayoral appointments. So without objection, no motion is necessary. No counselor items? Without further ado, and remember, we do have an executive session following. Yeah, we will adjourn.